I'm not ashamed.
What are the first three of the 10 Commandments recorded in Exodus? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on walking through the Bible.
Worth the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 20. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 7. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus chapter 20, beginning at verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing mercy to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. In chapter 20, we have the 10 Commandments being given to Israel, sometimes referred to as the Decalogue. It was given by God directly to Israel. It was not yet written on the tables of stone. That would come later. With Israel knowing about all these commandments, it would be the reason why they could be held responsible for building the golden calf and worshiping it later on in this book. The first commandment is that Israel was to have no other gods before God. Again, this does not mean that they could have other gods after Jehovah. It means that they are not to worship any other gods. Why? Because Jehovah is the God who led them out of Egypt. Jehovah is the only God of this universe and is therefore the only one deserving of worship. They were not to worship Baal or Ashtaroth or Moloch or Ra or any of the gods of the Egyptians or the Canaanites. The Canaanites are being expelled from their land for this very behavior, and Israel wasn't to follow in those footsteps. Because the children of Israel in the book of Joshua failed to fully get rid of the peoples of that land, it's part of the reason that they did follow after other gods, for the people that remained did. But the first commandment was about how Israel was to view Jehovah, should be a lesson to us, that God is to come first in our lives. The second commandment was that they weren't to make idols for worship. That, of course, did mean that they weren't to make idols to other gods and worship them, but it was dealt with in the first commandment. Instead, the second commandment is mainly referring to the fact that Israel was not to worship the true God, Jehovah, using an idol. God is the creator of all things and therefore cannot be represented by anything that we can make. He cannot be reduced to a carving, whether it be of gold, silver, or wood. He cannot be reduced to a painting. He cannot be depicted as an animal or something else we might see on this earth or in the water. He is God, a spirit, and doesn't desire us to depict him as something carnal and worship that image. He desires that we worship him as the supreme spiritual being. Christians today need to be careful of this idolatry. Some people wear crosses, which in effect is a form of idolatry. People make statues of Jesus or paintings of Jesus. God did not command this, does not desire this, and commanded against this both in the Old and New Testaments. Therefore, we should not be involved in such. Verse 5 says the reason for this is God is a jealous God. Usually we think of jealousy as being sinful. Jealousy is when we desire something that someone else possesses that we don't deserve. God deserves worship. In fact, he is the only being that deserves worship. So jealousy that is spoken of here is a righteous jealousy, not sinful jealousy. Verses 5 and 6 then contain phrases that are wildly misunderstood and misapplied. It says that God is a jealous God, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generations of those that hate him, but shows mercy to thousands of those that love him and keep his commandments. Some people take from this verse that God imputes the sins of the fathers on the children. In other words, the children inherit the father's sins. It is evident that some of the children of Israel viewed this passage this way when we read Ezekiel 18. However, this verse does not say that the son inherits the sins of the father. What is meant is that the children will often pay the consequences for their parents' sins. Why? Well, for one, children often learn from their parents, so if the parents hate the Lord, it is likely that the children will as well, and are thus deserving of punishment. But second, the nature of sin is such that it rarely only affects us, but others as well. If I steal from someone, I am charged with sin by God, but the person I steal from suffers the consequences of loss of property. And my children would suffer the loss of their father for a time when I'm convicted and put in jail. I am the only one charged with sin, yet others are suffering the consequences of my sin along with me. We're going to see that in the book of Numbers, where the children are going to suffer 40 years wandering in the wilderness, all because their parents rebelled against them. God, however, shows mercy on those that love him and keep his commandments, showing that God is righteous and doesn't charge sin against those who didn't sin. The third commandment is not to take the name of the Lord in vain, which means use it irreverently. God's name is holy. God is holy, and therefore we should treat God and his name with respect. The children of Israel took this commandment so seriously that they wouldn't write Jehovah in their scriptures. Instead, they wrote Adonai, which is why we in our English translations have Lord in all caps, signifying the place that Jehovah should be. Learning not to take the name of the Lord in vain is something that this world desperately needs today. When people get excited, they yell out God's name. When people get angry, they yell out God's name. And for Christians to exchange God's name for other things, like yelling, oh my goodness, or gosh, or golly, has the same effect. For all we're doing is trying to soften what we shouldn't be saying anyway. God is to be respected and his name held high, which is why it is discussed here to Israel as the third commandment. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 to 11, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.